Hi there, it's Kayla again. Today I wanted to talk with you, and I kind of felt like it would be appropriate to do that outside. We're going to be talking about minerals, mental health, and menstrual cycles. And this is something that I thought I would take you outside. I hope the road noise isn't too loud, but because I'm going to be planting some of my fall crop right now. So I'm getting the soil ready to plant my seeds so that they can go in the ground in a little bit. So thought I would do this and just talk with you guys on this topic because minerals are one of the things that our body mostly gets from the soil or from things that come from the soil, or it has a contributing factor. So um, I'm going to be talking a little bit about my own personal experience, but this might be relevant for some of you simply because I think it happens a lot more than we think about. We have a menstrual cycle, and that happens every month for most women. And some of that really contributes to how our nutrition is looking. Do we have enough minerals in our diet in order to have a cycle that month? Do we have enough minerals to support our mental health through that cycle in the same month or in other months? And so some of that is going to be a little bit of a give and take. And then the other thing to consider is, has someone taken birth control? Because birth control can also affect the types of minerals that a person has in their body, because it's going to have a synthetic hormone that will cause different reactions in our body. It's actually going to block certain reactions and encourage other ones. And because of that, we can end up with disproportionate amounts of hormones being made or not being made, and that means that nutrients might be used more than others in that process, whether that be to detoxify from those synthetic hormones, or whether that be because those synthetic hormones are preventing our natural hormones from being made, which help with absorption of some of those other minerals. So I'm going to talk about three main minerals today. It's going to be iodine, zinc, and copper. And the reason that I am kind of seeing this come into connection with me planting, especially our fall crop, is because women, when we experience mental health issues that often connect with our menstrual cycle, usually it's connected with PMS. PMS happens in our luteal phase, and that is kind of synonymous with the fall, and how fall kind of coincides with the breakdown of a lot of matter. The breakdown of the uterine lining is what happens in that luteal phase. And so some of those things are all kind of connected. So I'm just going to grab a few more of my little trays here, and I'll be right back. So one of the things that I have learned for myself is that when I took hormonal birth control, it probably contributed to depleting me of some nutrients, specifically iodine and zinc. And because of the type of birth control that I'm using right now, I also ended up having a high copper level. And so this was found out in the fall of 2021, so almost a year ago now. And I had found out in part because I was wanting to do my own research into what was going on in my body and be able to figure that out, so that I know, one, how to keep myself healthy, and that's not always a cookie cutter situation. And I wanted to be able to know and figure out some answers to why my body wasn't working how it should be, or how I expected it to be, even after coming off of birth control. And so some of this taught me a lot about these minerals and their effects in the body. And one of the things that I didn't really know was how big of a role zinc plays in our mental health. I actually have been working with a practitioner who practices and does testing with the Walsh protocol. And this is a nutritional psychiatric type of care, and that is something that I wasn't aware of before. I don't think that I necessarily needed psychiatric care, but I was having a lot of anxiety, especially after the use of hormonal birth control. that really wasn't subsiding, and I had probably even experienced a little bit of it before using birth control anyways. And so it really answered some questions about what I need in my diet, what I probably should be looking at in the foods that I'm choosing, and I also was considering a little bit of what my ancestral um, genetics has eaten for years and years and years, and how that could be playing a factor in how my body is responding right now. I am someone who is predominantly vegan. I do eat eggs, a little bit of goat cheese, but for the most part, I eat a plant based diet. And so I also don't eat gluten, whereas my ancestors mostly were Irish, also Syrian and Lebanese and Lithuanian, and those are very different diets from those ethnicities than I'm currently eating. I personally don't eat any fish. I don't eat a lot of seaweed. I don't eat I do eat a lot of potatoes, but I don't eat a ton of chickpeas. I don't eat lamb. So there are things in my diet that are not reflective of possibly the genes that have been passed on to me for thousands of years, hundreds of years at least. And so that was something that really had kind of clicked in when I was told that I have an iodine deficiency. And iodine is really important in the formation of thyroid hormone. You can't make thyroid hormone, you can't activate thyroid hormone without iodine. And so that was one of the biggest things that I've been working on, is making sure that I can get enough iodine through supplementation, but also considering what foods I can eat, ones that are or are not plant-based that contain iodine. And iodine, it affects our metabolism. And so that was something that really kind of struck me. So while I have had sushi and a little bit of seaweed in that, it hasn't really been a big part of my life. And so I am considering that my Irish ancestors, they used to eat a lot of sea moss. They used to eat a lot of foods in the winter that came from the sea, including a lot of fish. And so that is something that I personally might need to consider, although I have some personal issues with meat eating. It's not necessarily something that um, might be right for my body to eat completely plant-based, and that might be something that I need to consider for my future, for my fertility, and my menstrual cycle and mental health. Because when we don't have thyroid hormone produced, when we have too much or too little, we can get a lot of anxiety. We can have a lot of kind of fatigue, and that can also affect our mental health if we're not able to feel like we have enough energy to tackle the day ahead of us. And so these are all things that started to be things that I was thinking about and considering because of the symptoms that I was having, predominantly a lot of anxiety and a lot of kind of probably what my husband will call anger issues in the last half of my menstrual cycle, especially the last 1 or 2 days before my period. And so the other thing that I was talking about is zinc. And now zinc is a little bit of a different story. It's not something that comes from the ocean, it comes from the soil. And one of the things that I have been considering is I garden and I eat I eat all of the food that comes out of there. And I also predominantly buy organic food. But we have a different type of um, we have a different type of kind of way that farming is done right now. So even organic, that might just mean that they're not using certain types of pesticides or herbicides. And the thing to consider is that farm, in order to get certified, might have done that for the first few years, but then there really is very little maintenance over the organic certification. And so it has been something that I've been considering is, are our soils becoming depleted, or am I getting exposed to too much copper? And the reason I say that is because in our body, copper and zinc, they're in a ratio. There are certain ions in our body that are paired, that when you have one that's really high, the other will be low. And that's simply because of the the charge of them and that they go in the same place. So they can't be high both at the same time because it would plug into the same light socket, and one can only be there or the other. And so that is something that I also learned. And I also learned that low zinc levels can contribute to, if you're not shaking too much there, to irregular menstrual cycles as well as a lot of anxiety. And so these are things that I otherwise wouldn't have been aware of. I might not have been tested for, and really because they weren't necessarily the predominant issue I was going in for, might not have been addressed by another practitioner. And so I thought it was really interesting, not only to be going through a nutritional psychiatric type of protocol and testing, and to learn that I most likely don't have a functionally relevant MTHFR mutation. So that was not something I had expected, and instead I had nutrient deficiencies. So I think that we really need to consider, especially as women, where we're getting our food, how we can maybe supplement that in some cases when we've become nutrient deficient. That could be after having a child. There's a lot of nutritional needs during pregnancy, but also after pregnancy. We've developed a whole separate organ, the placenta, and in addition to developing the placenta, we developed a whole human. And so that's something to keep in mind, is that we have had another whole body be built from what we've consumed, and that whole and could be contributing to mental health that's shown up after a birth. It could be contributing to someone who might be experiencing not just postpartum depression, but long-term cyclical depression. I know that there is multiple conditions. There's things like cyclothymia vera, there's bipolar, there's other issues that can crop up around either that or during menopause as well. And so those are things that we might want to keep in mind when we might be looking for a treatment route or helping to solve the problem that we're facing when we're going through and trying to heal ourselves. So I thought that this was a really nice way to kind of tie in some of those, because a lot of it is mostly affected in our luteal phase, in our fall as women. And so that is something that I thought would be very fitting to do while I planted my fall seeds. So I hope this was helpful, and until next time, be well.